Well, it's great to be with you this morning. I'm Peter Salmon. I'm our lead pastor here, and man, what a great week. What a full week. And just if you were part of it, thank you for investing your time, investing your evenings, investing in the next generation here in our community. And so many kids that were a part of this, that some that are a part of our church on kind of a normal basis, but some that just came on an invitation from a friend, saw our signs outside, and maybe this is the first time they've ever been in a church building, and what a great experience to learn and hear the gospel kind of all along the theme of teamwork. What a great theme to weave together to teach the story of what Jesus has done for us. And so thank you for being a part of that. And when you see Jean Neese around, give her a big high five thank you as well. Please do that. Well, we're in the book of Matthew, steadily journeying through with Jesus. And last week we saw he called his disciples, and we saw that his ministry was beginning to grow and expand, and people from all over the place were coming. Crowds were forming to witness the great works of healings and miracles that he was doing. But then Jesus stops and begins to teach. And we'll often see this in Matthew, where there'll be kind of a few chapters where he's teaching, and then it'll be broken up by a few chapters where there's a lot of action and moving around and miracles and different things, and then he goes back to teaching. And this is one of those sections, the next three chapters, Matthew 5 through 7. And so let's read this morning, starting in Matthew 5, verse 1. When he saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to teach them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the humble, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. You are blessed when they insult you and persecute you and falsely say every kind of evil against you because of me. Be glad and rejoice, because your reward is great in heaven. For that is how they persecuted the prophets who were before you." So imagine the scene for a moment. Jesus, it tells us in verse 1, was with the crowds. And then he goes with his disciples up on the mountain to teach them. And this is why Matthew chapter 5 through 7 is called the Sermon on the Mount. And the mountain is an important feature in the story. When God gave his law to Moses in the Old Testament, Moses went up on the mountain. He went up on Mount Sinai and received God's law for the people, and that's where God appeared to him. And so for Jesus to lead his disciples up the mountain is actually a huge statement. Jesus is saying, hey, just like God gave Moses the law in the Old Testament, now I'm giving you God's law on this mountain. He's positioning himself as the new Moses, or maybe you could say even positioning himself as God giving the law. It makes it very clear in verse 1 that he sat down, which is kind of curious and strange. Why does it matter what posture he was taking as he was teaching? Who cares if he was sitting or kneeling or standing? But it's very particular to say that he sat down. Well, the rabbis, when they would teach in the synagogues, the Jewish religious teachers would sit down in the synagogue to teach. And that place where they would sit was called Moses' seat. When they sat, it displayed and symbolized the authority that Moses had, that they were assuming Moses' authority. And so Jesus, as he sits down, he's claiming authority to give genuine teaching from God. And he's kind of establishing this connection, this clear connection to Moses. And it's from this seat up on a mountain where Jesus gives what Augustine called the greatest sermon ever preached by the greatest preacher who ever lived. And in this sermon, Jesus gives many famous teachings, things that you've probably heard about. Even if you've never read the Bible, you'll have heard some of these phrases about being the salt of the earth, turning the other cheek, loving your enemies, building your house on the rock. And so we're going to spend the next few weeks in this sermon. And because of that, I want to just outline kind of three big approaches to the Sermon on the Mount, to all three chapters. And then we're going to jump in more specifically to our passage for today. But there's kind of three major ways that people approach the Sermon on the Mount. The first is called the moralist view. They read the Sermon on the Mount, and these are often people that say, Jesus was a good teacher and he's teaching me how to be a good person. And the whole point of the Bible is just be good and do good. And so this kind of person, they look at it and they say, all right, this is what I'm supposed to do, and I can do it if I try hard enough. Only problem is, this view is far too optimistic about people. It's kind of treating Jesus' teachings as a program for moral improvement. And if you read the Sermon on the Mount, as we study through it, you'll see that it is an incredibly high standard in the Sermon on the Mount. And to try to do this, and to try to live this out perfectly, is kind of like telling me, hey, Peter, why don't you go bench 10,000 pounds? And I'd say, I can't do it. And then if you told me, well, that's because you need to get in the gym. You need to have some protein shakes. And say, it doesn't matter how much I worked out. I'm never going to be able to bench 10,000 pounds. But the moralist, it says, no, if you try hard enough, you can do it. Now, the second view is the exact kind of opposite of this. This is called the impossible ideal view. This goes in the opposite direction. It says, Jesus, he's giving the new law, and what he's doing is giving you these impossible standards. And that's the whole point. It's so that you'll fail and finally admit that you need help. Now, there's something true in that. Okay? The Sermon on the Mount does expose our sin. But this view goes too far in the other direction. It reduces the Sermon on the Mount to nothing more than a tool to knock us down a couple pegs. It's only useful, this view would say it's only useful for making us realize we're sinners. And so this kind of person, they look at the Sermon on the Mount and they read it and they say, there's no way I can do this, so why try? Now the third view, and this is my favorite view, is the new life view. This says, hey, the Sermon on the Mount, it's not primarily aimed at outsiders who are looking for a moral path to get to God. And it's not primarily aimed at outsiders who need to be knocked down a peg. Instead, it's directed to people who are already on the inside. It's primarily directed to disciples of Jesus here, those who are on the inside because of the grace and love of Jesus. Jesus goes up on the mountain, and it says, with his disciples. Now, it's clear by the end of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 7 that the crowds were engaged, the crowds were listening. It says at the end that the crowds were amazed at these teachings. But what's also clear is the primary audience is the disciples. The crowds are overhearing it. And so Jesus in the previous chapter told his disciples, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Matthew 4:19. And here you could say in Matthew chapter 5, he begins teaching them what it looks like to live this new life, what he's making them into. And here it is. And so the Sermon on the Mount, it's not just giving you a ladder to climb, and it's not giving you a brick wall to run into to show you your failure. It's a picture of what the new life looks like when you belong to the kingdom of heaven. Now, at the very beginning of this sermon, we begin to learn about the new life in terms of 8 different statements that Jesus gives. And they're meant to kind of pack a punch. They're meant to be poetic. They're meant to make you think. And each of these statements starts with the word blessed, which is the English translation. The Latin translation is beatitudo, which is why we call it Beatitudes, if you've ever wondered, the 8 Beatitudes. But the original Greek is makarios. And this word makarios is significant because it's often translated blessed, but it's similar to the idea of being fortunate or happy. And so we might say this all the time. We might say, man, especially around this time, 4th of July, 250 years as a nation, right? This Saturday. And so we would say, man, we are so fortunate to live in the good old US of A, right? We would say, man, we are so blessed to live in this country. Or we might say it about other things. Man, we haven't been so fortunate with the weather that we had with VBS this past week. We use this all the time, and we always use, blessed or fortunate. We use these kind of words to refer to our circumstances, don't we? We look at our circumstances, we look at the weather, and we say, last week it was in the 70s. Man, weren't we so blessed? This week it's going to be in the 90s. We're no longer blessed. We look at our bank account, and we decide whether we're blessed or not blessed. We look at our circumstances, and we determine whether we're blessed, or often this idea of makarios, or blessing, can be translated fortune or even happiness. We look at our circumstances to determine, am I happy or not? Who is it that's truly happy? And if you were to ask a person just on the street, who is it that's blessed? Who is it that's happy? They would say, man, it's the person who has a lot of money, who has great health, who has great hair. I don't know what they would say, but that's the person that's blessed. But Jesus turns this whole idea upside down of what real blessing or real happiness is. That you can't determine it based on looking at someone's circumstances. Have you ever noticed, by the way, that the person that tries the hardest to be happy is the most unhappy person? And what's clear right off the top here is that it's God who's the one who blesses. You're blessed by God is the implication here. And Jesus shows who it is that God blesses, that has true blessing, true happiness from God. In this new life of following Jesus, there's a different kind of math equation that's used to calculate this. And it's not our circumstances. And so first he says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And we wouldn't think being poor is blessed in any way. Now Jesus says poor in spirit. We need to notice that. And what is poor in spirit? Well, pastor and author John Piper says it's 3 things. It's an awareness of powerlessness in ourselves. It's an awareness of spiritual bankruptcy and helplessness before God. And it's an awareness of moral uncleanness before God. This is the first, by the way, of the Beatitudes. And this is really, you could say, the beginning of the Christian life. That we come to God helpless, we come to God spiritually broke. Charles Spurgeon said, not what I have, but what I have not is the first point of contact between my soul and God. And so how many of us, though, like to admit that we're broke? How many of us like to admit that our hands are empty? A while back, Amy had asked me to go to Walmart and pick up a few things. And so went around the store and kind of put the stuff in my cart along with a few other things. As a guy, you always got to get a few other things that you notice as you're going through the store, because I don't do it very often. So it's like, man, I got to kind of throw a few extra things in the cart too. And then I came to the checkout line, and I'm kind of waiting and just checking everybody out. And I finally get up there and runs through all my groceries, scans everything, gives me the amount. I go up and I reach back for my wallet, and it's not there. You ever been there? And it was before the days when you did the whole magic phone thing where you could pay. And so I didn't know what to do in that moment. Like, nobody prepared me for that moment. Like, do I say, hey, will you take an IOU? You know, can I just borrow the stuff? Like, and so I just had to say, sorry, I don't have any money. And I walked out, right? Embarrassed. Like, there's like 8 people behind me that are like, we just waited for you that whole time. And now you just walked away. But man, I don't like to be in that situation. But when it comes to standing before God, man, our hands are empty. Man, we're broke. It's like, God, I got nothing to show you for my life. And so as we think about this is the person that's blessed. And this is the person that's given the kingdom of heaven. The one who's spiritually broke, who understands their moral uncleanness. And so this is why, man, Christianity is so different than every other religion. Every other religion teaches that you do good things, you get good from God. But Christianity teaches, man, you come to God empty-handed, acknowledging your brokenness, acknowledging your need. Man, think about God and his holiness and his perfection. Is God going to be impressed by our good works? Is God going to be impressed by our church attendance? Is God going to be impressed by how much of the Bible that we've read? No. Would Beethoven be impressed if you walked over to the piano and plunked out Mary Had a Little Lamb? And neither will God be impressed with our righteousness, but you know what he looks at and you know what he receives is our poverty of spirit. When we come saying, God, I'm spiritually broke, that's who he blesses. And this is what David discovered in Psalm 32. The psalmist says this: how joyful is the one whose transgression is forgiven. Other translations say, how happy. How happy is the one whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. And again, he says, how joyful is the person in whom the Lord does not that the Lord does not charge with iniquity, and in whose spirit is no deceit. When I kept silent, my bones became brittle from groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy on me. My strength was drained as in the summer's heat. Then I acknowledged my sin to you, and did not conceal my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. And the path to joy, the psalmist says, it's not in concealing our transgressions. It's not in trying to put on a good face. It's not in trying to put on a good outward appearance for God. It's in coming to God, confessing our sin, admitting our spiritual poverty, and receiving his grace and forgiveness. Man, blessed are the poor in spirit. But how upside down this is. The next beatitude, and by the way, some of you are looking at your watches and you're thinking, man, he spent a lot of time on that first one. There's 7 more to go. So I'm going to go a little quicker here, these next few. He says, blessed are those who mourn. They will be comforted. This is the strongest Greek word that could be used for mourning. Think about the intensity of grief and mourning and loss. And so this is why this seems to be, again, very upside down. How could the person who's mourning be blessed? It's like saying the person who's sad is happy. Well, this is the kind of mourning that can't easily be shaken off, can't easily be shrugged off. It's a profound sense that life isn't what it should be, that I'm not the way I should be. And it's something that we try to cover up. It's something we try to self-medicate away. We try to bring comfort to ourselves to kind of drown out this nagging sense, this mourning over what is. But what Jesus is saying is, blessed is the one who fully engages with the reality of the mourning, the appropriate mourning over what this world isn't, over what I lack in my own morality. This is the person that God will comfort. Not the person that tries to bring comfort to themselves, but the person that allows God to comfort them. Again, though, upside down. Those who are blessed, those who are truly happy are the mourners, because they will find God's comfort in a way that few do. And then he says, blessed are the humble, for they will inherit the earth. Now, you might have a translation of the Bible that uses the word meek, which is also a good translation of this, but often we think of meek as being weak. But don't get those two words confused for each other. Because the word for meek or humble here is prautes, which means strength under control. Picture a tamed animal, like a horse. Incredibly strong, but tame, under submission, with a bit and a bridle, can be controlled by the rider. In comparison, you have the classic bull in a china shop. Out of control, strength that is demanding of life, saying, no, you owe me, I need this now. The person that's trying to grasp at whatever they can to get happiness out of this world. And Jesus says, no, it's the tamed horse, not the bull in the china shop, that will inherit the earth. Now also notice the word inherit. It didn't say earn. It says inherit. This is not something that you can earn. This is something you receive. It's something given to you. And this is the kind of person that God blesses. Then he says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Those who hunger and thirst for righteousness can experience this kind of longing in three different ways. It could be a desire to be righteous, to be right with God. And we can only be right with God through the grace and forgiveness of Jesus, through the work Jesus did on the cross to atone for our sins. It could be a desire to do what is right, a hunger and thirst to just do the things that God commands. God, I just want to obey you and be your disciple, to imitate you. And it could be a desire to see right done in the world. I want to see your righteousness done in the world. I want to see your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. But according to this world, and it's said that nice guys finish last. It's frowned upon to be, holier than thou. But Jesus says, no, listen, the ones who truly hunger and thirst for righteousness, they'll be filled. And not just covered with the veneer of the righteousness of Christ, but filled with righteousness. Then he says, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Again, what the world values is getting your pound of flesh, getting even. I don't get mad, I just get even. But believers in Jesus Christ understand that, man, God has given me such great mercy that I can give mercy to others. That I have this hope and expectation of mercy that will be given to me someday, that I can show that mercy to others. He says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Now, the heart is what's on the inside that only God can see. Man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart, and only God knows the heart. Now, we in our culture, we elevate outward appearance. We elevate what people see on the outside. We want to make sure that what we put online, what we put for everyone to see, is perfect and flawless. But then isn't it interesting that people spend a lot of time curating how things look on their Instagram and wanting everything to look perfect and polished, but then if you give them an anonymous Twitter account, they'll just go crazy and you see the outflow of their hearts. You see the sin. You see how vicious. You see how vile. If you want to expose what's really in someone's heart, let them be anonymous on the internet for a while. And see, God sees the heart. There's no anonymity with God. There's nothing that can be hidden from him. And on the one hand, that can be scary. But on the other hand, the previous statement of blessing, beatitude was, are you hungry and thirsty for righteousness? You will be filled. Could it be that God is the one who can purify the heart, who can truly make us righteous from the inside out? And then he says, blessed are the peacemakers in verse 9. Peacemaking, understand, it's not passive. It doesn't mean just avoiding conflict. It's active. It's seeking to end bitterness and strife. It doesn't mean being soft. It takes great strength, actually, and great self-control and trust in God to be a peacemaker. And so let me ask you, the last fight that you had with someone, were you a peacemaker? Or were you just trying to win? Because blessed are the peacemakers, Jesus said. And then this last one, which is maybe the most upside down of all of them. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. You are blessed when they insult you and persecute you and falsely say every kind of evil against you because of me. Be glad and rejoice, because your reward is great in heaven. For that is how they persecuted the prophets who were before you. This is a double blessing. Twice here he says, blessed are you who are persecuted. And how many people would think this way? Man, I'm so blessed to be persecuted. I'm so blessed, so fortunate to have people saying all kinds of evil about me. I'm so happy to be insulted. But as disciples of Jesus living this new life, we live with a different perspective, a different horizon in view that isn't just kind of in the nitty-gritty of this world. It is focused on the rewards of the next world, of the kingdom of heaven. And so do you see how this new life we have as disciples of Jesus is so against the grain, is so countercultural, so upside down of what the world would think? And so let me put it this way. Let me summarize here for us today. Here's what the world would say. And instead of blessed are the poor in spirit, the world would say, blessed are those who have it all together. Instead of blessed are those who mourn, the world would say, blessed are those who never feel bad. Instead of blessed are the meek or the humble, the world would say, blessed are the ruthless. They will inherit the earth. Instead of blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, we would say, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for applause and achievement. Instead of blessed are the pure in heart, or rather the merciful, we would say, blessed are those who get even. Instead of blessed are the pure in heart, we would say, blessed are those who put on a good show on the outside for others. Instead of blessed are the peacemakers, we would say, blessed are those who win, no matter the cost. Instead of blessed are the persecuted, we would say, blessed are the popular. And so I wonder, which way do you look at life? Which way do you understand the blessings of God? Well, let me give you three to close up and to summarize. Let me give you 3 beliefs I think that we need to have based on the Beatitudes that lead to true happiness, a true understanding of God's blessings. First, that true happiness can only be given by God. And I wonder if we really believe that, to really believe that only God can give me true happiness. Not my spouse, not my sports team, not my kids, not the weather. Only God can give me true happiness. Second, true happiness is not determined by our current circumstances. We tend to think if I'm having a bad day, man, God isn't blessing me. But true blessing isn't based on circumstances. This is why somebody can be persecuted and still say, man, I am happy and blessed by God. And true happiness, finally, is found in heavenly rewards, not in earthly ones. And maybe this is key to all of this. Where do we look to as our final destination? What do we look to as our hope? Is it this earth? Is it the rewards that we'll have here, or heavenly rewards? I was reminded of Romans 8:18 this week that says, for the sufferings of this present time are nothing to be compared to the glory that's to be revealed in us. And so this is the new life. These are the realities of the new life, of living in the kingdom of heaven. And so let me ask you, are you here today and do you understand your poverty of spirit? Do you understand your spiritual brokenness before God? That you come with empty hands? Do you hunger and thirst for righteousness, His righteousness, to be given to you because of what Jesus has done? Do you mourn over sin, over your own sin? And God will comfort you as you come to Him. Again, this is an upside down way of living, but it's the way of the kingdom of heaven. It's the way of a disciple of Jesus. It's a way that's not dependent on our circumstances. But this is the one who God blesses. So God, we thank you for your word. And God, we thank you for the truth of your word that just cuts through so many of the mindsets, so many of the ways of thinking that we have, that we just adopt, maybe unknowingly, just living in this world, rubbing shoulders with people, just looking so often at the things of this world instead of looking to you. And so I pray, God, that you would straighten out our perspective, reprogram our brains and our hearts to understand truly what it means to be blessed, truly how we can be happy in you. And God, for many, these words may seem very strange. God, how could it be that I could be happy even when life isn't going the way I want it to go? But God, I thank you that you are such a big God, such an eternal God, a God that's so great and so much bigger than our circumstances, and we can trust in you. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Why don't you stand and let's continue to worship together.